The frost had settled thick on the ground for 7 mornings in a row, and each time Grukka stepped outside her stone cottage at dawn, she found them. Boot prints, human-sized, circling the pen where her sheep huddled together for warmth. The wolves had been relentless, their howls piercing the mountain night, but something kept them at bay, and that something wore boots and walked on 2 legs instead of 4. She knelt beside the clearest print, her thick green fingers tracing the outline pressed into the silver frost. The tread was worn on the left heel, suggesting a man who favored that leg, perhaps from an old injury. The depth of the impression told her he was tall and carried weight, likely muscle rather than fat given how evenly distributed the prints were. He had paced the perimeter of her flock repeatedly, sometimes stopping in the same spots where she had seen wolf tracks the day before. Grukka straightened, her breath misting in the cold mountain air. Her pointed ears twitched at every sound, listening for danger, for the wolves, for the mysterious guardian who seemed to think her incapable of protecting what was hers. Her small tusks jutted from her lower jaw, catching the early light as she scowled at the tree line. She had come to these mountains 6 months ago, exiled from her clan for the crime of speaking against their war chief when he had ordered a raid on a human settlement full of women and children. The mountains were harsh, but they were honest. They did not lie or betray. They simply existed, indifferent to whether you were orc or human, strong or weak. She had built her life here alone, trading wool and mutton with the few trappers and homesteaders brave or desperate enough to deal with an orc. Most gave her a wide berth, their hands never straying far from their weapons when they came to barter. She did not blame them. The war between their peoples had raged for generations, fed by fear and old hatreds that neither side seemed willing to relinquish. But this human, whoever he was, had been watching over her flock for a week. The question that gnawed at her was why. The sheep bleated nervously as she entered their pen, checking each one for injuries or signs of distress. The old ram, Thornback, butted his head against her leg in greeting. She scratched behind his ears absently, her mind elsewhere. 3 of her ewes were pregnant, due to lamb in another month. She could not afford to lose a single animal to the wolves. Every sheep represented survival through the winter, food and trade goods that meant the difference between life and death in these unforgiving peaks. As she worked, the sun climbed higher, burning away the frost but not the mystery. She mucked out the pen, reinforced a weak section of fence and checked her snares along the forest edge. 2 rabbits, both plump and winter fat. Good. She would make a stew. It was as she returned to her cottage that she saw it, a pile of fresh-cut firewood stacked neatly beside her door. Her hand went immediately to the axe at her belt, her eyes scanning the surroundings. The wood had not been there when she had gone to check the snares. Someone had approached while she was occupied, someone who moved quietly enough that she had not heard them. The logs were split with expert precision, each piece the perfect size for her hearth. Whoever had done this knew what they were doing. She bent down, examining the cuts. An axe, well maintained and sharp. She lifted one piece and inhaled. Pine, freshly cut. The sap was still sticky on the bark. A gift, or a trap. Grukka carried the wood inside, piece by piece, stacking it beside her hearth. She would use it. Wasting good firewood in winter was foolishness, regardless of its source. But she also took her bow from its place on the wall and set it within easy reach, stringing it with practiced movements. That night, she did not sleep deeply. She dozed in her chair, wrapped in furs, her ears alert for any sound beyond the usual night chorus of wind and distant wolves. The wolves howled again, closer this time. She heard them moving through the forest, their pack calls echoing off the mountainside. Her sheep panicked, their frightened bleating sharp in the darkness. Grukka grabbed her bow and rushed outside, an arrow already nocked. The moon was bright enough to see by, and what she saw made her freeze. A man stood between her sheep pen and the forest. He was tall, as she had guessed from his prints, with broad shoulders and long dark hair tied back from his face. He wore weathered leathers and a thick wool cloak, and in his hands he held a bow identical to hers, arrow drawn and aimed at the tree line where yellow eyes gleamed in the shadows. The wolves hesitated. There were 5 of them, their gray forms barely distinguishable from the snow and stone. The largest, a male with a scarred muzzle, snarled at the man but did not advance. The man did not move. He stood perfectly still, the bow held steady, his aim never wavering. Grukka could see the tension in his shoulders, the controlled breathing that kept his shot true. He was no stranger to this standoff. She should have announced herself. She should have called out, demanded to know what he was doing on her land. Instead, she found herself watching, curious despite herself. The wolves circled, trying to find an angle, a weakness. The man turned with them, always keeping himself between the predators and the sheep. His movements were economical, efficient. He did not waste energy on unnecessary gestures or false warnings. He simply stood as an immovable barrier, and his presence said everything that needed saying. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only minutes, the lead wolf huffed and retreated. The pack followed, melting back into the forest like smoke. The man held his position until their sounds faded completely, then slowly lowered his bow. His shoulders sagged slightly, as if he had been holding more than just the weapon. Grukka stepped forward, deliberately making noise so he would not think her an enemy. His head snapped toward her, and for a heartbeat they simply stared at each other across the frost-silvered ground. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps 30 winters, with a weathered face that spoke of a hard life lived outdoors. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, and his eyes were a pale gray that seemed to catch and hold the moonlight. He did not raise his bow toward her, though his hand remained on it. "You have been circling my flock," Grukka said, her voice rough from disuse. She spoke little these days, with no one to talk to but her sheep. "The wolves have been circling your flock," the man replied. His voice was deep, quiet, the kind of voice that did not need volume to carry weight. "I have been circling the wolves. I did not ask for your help. I did not ask for your permission." She bristled at that, her tusks catching the light as she scowled. "This is my land, my flock." "Yes." He did not elaborate, did not defend himself or explain. Just that single word, acknowledging her statement without conceding his point. "Why?" she demanded, stepping closer. She was tall for an orc woman, nearly 6 feet, but he had several inches on her. She refused to be intimidated by the difference. "Why guard the flock of an orc? Your people hate mine." Something flickered across his face, too quick for her to read. "Not all of us. Most, he agreed. He slung his bow over his shoulder, the gesture slow and deliberate, showing he meant no threat. "My name is Thane Irwin. I have a homestead 3 miles east, down in the valley. I lost half my goats to this pack last month. When I tracked them, I found they were ranging up here, targeting your sheep. And you decided to protect them. Why not simply kill the wolves?" I tried. He gestured to his bow. "I am one man, they are 5 and smart enough to scatter when I get close. But if I can keep them from an easy meal, they will move on to easier hunting grounds. Wild game, perhaps, something that does not belong to people trying to survive the winter." It made sense, tactically. But it did not explain why he had helped her specifically, why he had not simply warned her and let her deal with it herself. She said as much. Thane was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his words came slowly, as if he was picking through thorns to find them. 6 years ago, I fought in the border wars. I did things I am not proud of. I killed orcs who were no different from you, trying to protect their homes and families. When the war ended and I came here to start over, I told myself I was done with killing. But old habits die hard, and when I see a threat, I react. He met her eyes steadily. You are not a threat. You are a neighbor, whether either of us likes it or not, and neighbors help each other survive. Grukka did not know what to say to that. In her experience, humans did not think of orcs as neighbors. They thought of them as monsters to be driven away or destroyed. Yet this man had spent a week of cold nights circling her property, losing sleep and risking his own safety to protect animals that did not belong to him. I did not need your help, she said finally, but the words lacked heat. Perhaps not, Thane agreed. But you have it anyway. He turned to leave, then paused. The wolves will be back. They are too hungry to give up easily. I will continue my patrols if you do not object. And if I do object. He looked back at her, and something that might have been a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Then I suppose I will have to be more careful about leaving boot prints in the frost. He walked away before she could respond, disappearing into the forest with the kind of silence that spoke of long practice. Grukka stood alone in the cold, staring after him, feeling as if the world had shifted slightly beneath her feet. The next morning there were boot prints again, circling the pen. But this time, there was also a dead rabbit hanging from her fence post, already gutted and cleaned, ready for the pot. She took it inside, frowning at the gift. It would be foolish to refuse good meat. She told herself that was the only reason she accepted it, that it had nothing to do with the strange flutter in her chest when she remembered the way Thane had stood between the wolves and her flock, unwavering as stone. The days that followed fell into a pattern. Grukka tended her sheep, checked her snares, and worked on the endless tasks that winter demanded. Each morning she found evidence of Thane's nightly vigil, boot prints in the frost, and occasionally another small gift, more firewood, a brace of rabbits. Once a grouse, its neck cleanly broken. She did not see him again for nearly a week. The wolves tested the perimeter twice more, but each time something drove them back before they could reach the sheep. On the 8th night, a blizzard rolled down from the peaks, burying the world in white. Grukka woke to find her cottage half buried in snow, the door blocked. It took her an hour to dig herself out, and when she finally reached the sheep pen, she found disaster. A section of the fence had collapsed under the weight of the snow. 3 of her sheep were missing, their tracks leading into the forest. Wolf tracks overlaid them following. Her pregnant ewes. Grukka did not hesitate. She grabbed her bow, her axe, and a length of rope, then set off into the storm at a run. The wind tore at her cloak and bit through her clothes, but she ignored it. Those ewes represented her entire future. Without them and their lambs, she would not have enough stock to rebuild her flock come spring. The tracks were already filling with fresh snow, but she followed them by instinct and experience, reading the story written in broken branches and disturbed drifts. The wolves had split up, each taking a sheep. Smart. It meant she could not save all 3. She would have to choose. She chose the oldest ewe, the one who had produced the strongest lambs year after year. Her tracks led deeper into the forest, into terrain Grukka did not know well. The wolf that had taken her was cunning, using the storm to cover its escape. But Grukka was cunning too. She cut through a ravine, gambling on where the wolf would go, and emerged ahead of it. The ewe was still alive, bleeding from bites to her hind legs but mobile. The wolf saw Grukka and dropped its prey, snarling. It was one of the smaller pack members, a female, but still dangerous. They circled each other in the snow, the wolf weighing its chances, Grukka trying to present a target too threatening to risk. An arrow sprouted from the snow between them. Both Grukka and the wolf jumped back, startled. Thane emerged from the trees, another arrow already knocked. He did not aim at the wolf, but the threat was clear. The wolf looked between them, calculating, then turned and fled. It could find easier prey. "Are you insane?" Thane demanded, striding toward her. Snow clung to his hair and shoulders, and his face was flushed with cold and anger. "Running into a blizzard alone after a pack of wolves. They took my sheep," Grukka shot back. "I could not simply let them go." "You could have been killed." "So could you? Why are you here?" "I saw the tracks when I came to check on your flock. I followed you." He grabbed the ewe before she could, examining her injuries with quick, competent hands. "She will live if we get her back and treat these wounds. Can you carry her?" "Of course I can carry her." She hefted the ewe over her shoulders, ignoring its frightened bleating. The animal was heavy, nearly 80 pounds of wool and panic, but she had carried heavier. "What about the others?" Thane's expression turned grim. "I found one already dead. The other is likely the same. We need to get back before this storm gets worse." They did not speak on the return journey. All their energy went toward fighting through the deepening snow, heads down against the wind that threatened to knock them off their feet. Twice Grukka stumbled, and twice Thane was there, his hand on her elbow, steadying her. When they finally reached her cottage, both of them were shaking with cold and exhaustion. Thane helped her get the ewe into the small barn attached to the cottage, where her other animals had taken shelter. Together they cleaned and bandaged the wounds, working in the kind of easy synchronicity that came from shared purpose. His hands were gentle with the frightened animal, murmuring soft reassurances that seemed to calm her. "You are good with animals," Grukka observed. "I grew up on a farm." "Before the war." He did not elaborate, but she heard the weight behind those words. Before. When life was different. When he was different. When the ewe was settled, they stood in the barn, catching their breath. Grukka became acutely aware that they were alone together in a small space, close enough that she could see the snowflakes melting in his hair, the way his chest rose and fell with each breath. He smelled of pine and smoke and something else, something distinctly human that made her very conscious of the differences between them. "You should stay," she heard herself say. "The storm is getting worse. You will not make it back to your homestead safely." Thane looked at her, surprise flickering across his features. "I do not want to impose. You have been patrolling my land for over a week, driving off wolves and leaving me game and firewood. I think you have earned a warm meal and a place to wait out the storm." She turned away, uncomfortable with the intensity of his gaze. "It is the practical thing to do. Nothing more." "Nothing more," he echoed, but there was something in his voice that made her wonder if he believed that any more than she did. They went into the cottage, shaking snow from their clothes. Grukka's home was small but well built, the stone walls thick enough to hold heat, the hearth large enough to warm the single room that served as kitchen, dining area, and living space. A ladder led to a loft where she slept. It was sparse, functional, the home of someone who had started with nothing and built piece by piece. She set about making stew while Thane fed the fire, adding logs from the pile he himself had cut. They moved around each other carefully, two strangers learning the boundaries of shared space. The cottage felt smaller with him in it, his presence large in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. "Why do you live alone?" he asked as she chopped vegetables. "Orcs usually live in clans, families. At least, that is what I always heard. I was cast out." She did not usually speak of it, but something about the storm outside, the warmth inside, loosened her tongue. "My clan's war chief wanted to raid a human settlement. Women and children mostly, while the men were away hunting. I spoke against it. I said it was dishonorable, that attacking the defenseless made us no better than the monsters humans believed us to be." She stirred the pot, watching the vegetables bob in the simmering water. He gave me a choice, join the raid or leave. I left. That was brave, she snorted. It was foolish. I had nothing, no one. I came here with a handful of sheep and a dream of building something that was mine, something I earned rather than took. She glanced at him. Your people would say I should not have been given that choice, that all orcs are monsters regardless. Some would say that, Thane agreed, but they would be wrong. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant. I have seen monsters, Grukka. I have fought them. I have been one. Monsters are not defined by their skin or their tusks. They are defined by their choices. He focused on her again. You made a good choice. A hard one, but good. Something warm unfurled in her chest, something dangerous. She turned back to the stew, using the cooking as an excuse to avoid his eyes. What about you? Why do you live alone? Did you have a family before the war? No. There was a woman once before I enlisted. She married someone else while I was gone, someone smarter who stayed home. There was no bitterness in his voice, only a kind of resigned acceptance. When I came back, I did not fit anymore, not in my village, not with my old friends. Everyone wanted me to be the person I was before, but that person was dead, killed in some nameless battle over a border that has shifted a dozen times since. So I came here, where no one knew me, where I could be whoever I managed to become. And who is that? He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. I am still figuring that out. They ate in companionable silence, the stew warming them from the inside out. Outside, the storm raged, but inside the cottage it felt safe, almost cozy. After the meal, Grukka made tea from herbs she had dried in the fall, and they sat by the fire, watching the flames dance. I lost 2 sheep tonight, she said quietly. I cannot afford losses like that. I know. I am sorry I could not save them. You saved one. And you helped me when you had no obligation to do so. She hesitated, then added, Thank you. You are welcome. He stared into his tea. The wolves will move on soon. Another few days, perhaps a week. The pack will realize the hunting is too difficult here and find easier grounds. And then you will stop coming. It was not a question, but he treated it as one. Do you want me to stop coming? Grukka did not answer immediately. She should say yes. She should thank him for his help and send him on his way when the storm cleared, back to his own life and his own homestead. It was safer that way, simpler. She did not need complications, did not need the confused feelings that swirled inside her when she looked at him. But what she said was, No, I do not want you to stop coming. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning neither was quite ready to examine. Thane looked at her, and in the firelight his eyes were warm, searching. Then I will not stop. The storm blew itself out by morning, leaving the world crystalline and silent under fresh snow. Thane helped Grukka dig out the sheep pen and repair the collapsed fence before he left. They worked side by side, their breath misting in the cold air, and when they finished, he did not immediately say goodbye. I will come back tonight, he said, to check on the ewe and to watch for the wolves. You do not have to, I know, but I will anyway. He left, following his own trail back toward the valley. Grukka watched him go, then returned to her work, trying not to think about how empty the cottage felt in his absence. True to his word, Thane returned that night, and the night after, and the one after that. The wolves tested them twice more, but the combined defense was too much. On the 5th night, they heard the pack moving away, their howls growing distant as they sought hunting grounds elsewhere. They are gone, Thane said, standing beside Grukka outside her cottage. They had fallen into the habit of sharing a late meal after his patrol, talking quietly by the fire. It had become the best part of her day, something she looked forward to with an anticipation that both thrilled and frightened her. Yes, she agreed. She should have been relieved. The threat was over, but all she could think was that he had no reason to keep coming now. "I should let you get back to your life," he said, but he did not move to leave. "You should," she agreed, but she did not want him to go. They stood in the cold, the stars brilliant overhead, and between them hung all the things neither had the courage to say. Finally, Thane broke the silence. "Would you allow me to visit? Not to patrol, just to visit, to talk." He stumbled over the words, awkward in a way he had not been when facing down wolves. "I enjoy your company. I would like to continue if you are willing." "I am willing," Grukka said, her heart beating faster. "I would like that very much." His smile transformed his face, making him look younger, less burdened. "Tomorrow, then. I will come tomorrow in the daylight this time." "Tomorrow," she agreed. He left, and Grukka went inside, feeling as if she were standing on the edge of a cliff, about to jump. Part of her whispered warnings about the danger, about the impossibility of what was growing between them. But a larger part, the part that had spoken out against her war chief and chosen exile over dishonor, told her to be brave, to take the risk. She fell asleep smiling. Thane came the next day, as promised, arriving in the early afternoon. He brought fresh bread from his own baking and a jar of honey he had traded for in the autumn. They ate it together, warm and sweet, and afterward he helped her with the endless winter chores. He was good company, comfortable with silence but quick with a dry observation that made her laugh. She had not laughed much since her exile. She had forgotten how good it felt. Over the following weeks, his visits became regular, expected. He came 3 or 4 times a week, always bringing something: food, firewood, his labor. In return, she fed him, mended his clothes when they needed it, and traded him wool from her sheep. But the real exchange was in the conversations, in the slow sharing of stories and thoughts and dreams. She learned that he had a younger sister who lived 2 territories away, married to a merchant. He had not seen her in 3 years. She learned that he loved the mountains, the solitude, but sometimes missed the easy companionship of his old life. She learned that he had nightmares about the war, that some nights he woke up with his hand reaching for a weapon, expecting an attack that never came. He learned that she had always been different from her clan, more interested in building than raiding. He learned that she wanted a family someday, children of her own, but feared she had given up that possibility when she chose exile. He learned that she sang sometimes, old orc songs in a language he did not understand, her voice surprisingly sweet for someone so fierce. Winter deepened, and with it their connection. It was on a particularly cold evening when Thane had stayed late helping her deliver a lamb that something shifted between them. The birth had been difficult, the ewe struggling, and Grukka had been up to her elbows in blood and fluid, working to turn the lamb and ease it into the world. Thane had held the ewe steady, murmuring reassurances, his presence calm and grounding. When the lamb finally emerged, wet and bleeding, Grukka had felt tears prick her eyes. It was the first lamb born to her flock since her exile, the first proof that she could sustain this life she had built. Thane had grinned at her, his eyes bright, and she had laughed, giddy with relief and joy. They cleaned up together, washing away the evidence of the birth, and when they were done, Grukka found she did not want him to leave. The cottage was warm, the fire crackling, and he was there, solid and real, and she was tired of pretending she did not feel what she felt. "Stay," she said. "It is late and cold. Stay tonight." Thane looked at her, understanding what she was asking, what she was offering. "Grukka, I know what I am asking," she interrupted. "I know what it means, what it could mean." She stepped closer to him, close enough that she could see the firelight reflected in his eyes. "I am orc. You are human. Our peoples hate each other. Being with me could make you an outcast the same as I am. I know all of that, but I do not care anymore. I am tired of being alone. I am tired of being afraid. She took a breath, gathering her courage. I want you to stay. I want that too, Thane said quietly. More than I should. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed his fingers against her cheek. His touch was warm, gentle. But I need you to understand. If I stay, if we do this, I am not walking away after. I do not do anything halfway. If you let me into your life, you are stuck with me. That does not sound terrible, she said, and then she was kissing him. It was awkward at first, their tusks getting in the way, but they figured it out, learning the angles and rhythms of each other. His hands slid into her hair, hers gripped his shoulders, and for a long moment the world narrowed to just this. His mouth on hers, his heart beating against her palm, the soft sound he made when she deepened the kiss. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Thane rested his forehead against hers. I am staying, he said. Tonight, tomorrow, all the nights after, if you will have me. I will have you, Grukka whispered. They climbed the ladder to her loft together, and there, in the warmth and darkness, they learned each other in ways both tender and passionate. Thane was gentle with her, reverent, as if she were something precious rather than something to be feared. And Grukka, who had been alone for so long, who had forgotten what it was to be touched with kindness, opened herself to him completely. Afterward, they lay tangled together under furs, her head on his chest, his arms wrapped around her. She listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong, and felt a peace she had not known was possible. What do we do now? She asked quietly. When people find out, let them find out, Thane said. Let them think what they want, I do not care. They will call you a traitor, a monster lover. Then I will be in good company. He pressed a kiss to her hair. I told you I do not do anything halfway, I meant it. She believed him, and in that belief she found something she had lost when her clan cast her out, hope. Spring came slowly to the mountains, the snow melting in fits and starts, revealing the brown earth beneath. Grukka's flock grew as the ewes delivered their lambs, and with Thane's help, she built new pens and expanded her pastures. He moved his goats to her land, merging their herds in their lives. They worked from dawn to dusk, building something together, something that was theirs. The first trapper who came to trade stared at them, his eyes wide with shock at seeing a human and an orc working side by side. When Thane slung an arm casually around Grukka's shoulders and negotiated the wool price, the trapper backed away as if burned, muttering about unnatural acts and the world going mad. That went well, Thane said dryly after the man fled. He will tell everyone, Grukka warned. By next week the whole territory will know. Good. Saves us the trouble of making announcements. She loved him for that casual bravery, for his refusal to hide what they were to each other. But she also worried. Humans could be cruel when they felt their boundaries threatened, so could orcs. Her worries proved founded a week later when a group of human homesteaders arrived at her cottage. 5 men, all armed, all grim-faced. Thane was working in the far pasture, too far to call without alerting the men to his presence. Grukka faced them alone, her hand on her axe. You are the orc woman who has bewitched Thane Erwin, the leader said. He was older, gray-haired, with the weathered look of a man who had spent his life fighting the land and winning. I have bewitched no one, Grukka replied coldly. Thane is a grown man who makes his own choices. No human would choose to lie with an orc unless he was bewitched or cursed. The man spat on the ground. We have come to free him from your influence, by force if necessary. You will not lay a hand on her. Thane emerged from the barn, his bow in hand. An arrow knocked and aimed at the leader. His face was hard, colder than Grukka had ever seen it. This was the soldier he had been, the man who had fought in the border wars. Dangerous. Thane, be reasonable, another of the men said. She is an orc. They are animals, savages. Whatever she has done to you, she has done nothing to me except treat me with more kindness and respect than any of you have shown her. Thane did not lower his bow. I am with her because I choose to be, because she is a better person than most humans I have known. If you have a problem with that, you can leave. Now. You are making a mistake, the leader said. When others hear of this, they will come. We are not the only ones who find this unnatural. Then let them come, Thane said flatly. And they can leave too, or they can test whether I have forgotten how to fight. Their choice. The men looked at each other, uncertain. Finally, the leader shook his head. You are a fool, Erwin, and when this ends badly, do not say we did not warn you. They left, but the threat hung in the air like smoke. Grukka and Thane stood together, watching them disappear down the mountain path. They will come back, Grukka said quietly, or others will. We cannot fight the whole world, Thane. We do not have to fight the whole world. Just the parts that will not leave us in peace. He put his arm around her, pulling her close. I am not giving you up, not for them, not for anyone. Even if it costs you everything, you are everything, he said simply. Everything else is just details. But the details mattered, and they both knew it. Over the following weeks, their trade dried up as word spread. Trappers and homesteaders who had been willing to buy wool and meat from Grukka now refused, unwilling to do business with an orc who had, in their eyes, corrupted one of their own. Thane fared little better. His own neighbors turned their backs on him, whispering behind their hands. They were becoming pariahs, isolated by their love. It would have been easy to give in, to give up, to decide the price was too high. But every night when they lay together in the darkness, listening to the wind howl outside, Grukka found her resolve strengthened. She would not give him up. She could not. The crisis came on a warm spring evening, 2 months after the homesteader's visit. Grukka was tending the garden she had planted, pulling weeds and checking for pests, when she heard shouting from the direction of the sheep pen. She ran, grabbing her axe, and found Thane facing down 3 orc warriors. They were from her old clan. She recognized them immediately. Bracca, a scarred veteran who had been her father's friend, Grukka's younger brother Morg, and Thrash, the war chief's eldest son, who had always looked at her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. Grukka, Bracca said, his voice heavy with disappointment. We heard rumors. We did not want to believe them. But here you are living with a human, sharing his bed. He shook his head. Your father would be ashamed. My father taught me to choose honor over convenience, Grukka shot back. I have done nothing to be ashamed of. You have betrayed your people, Thrash snarled. He pointed at Thane with his sword. This human, all humans are our enemies. They have killed our families, burned our homes. And you spread your legs for one like a common, finish that sentence and lose your tongue, Grukka interrupted, her voice deadly quiet. Thane is worth 10 of you, Thrash. He has more honor in his smallest finger than you have in your entire body. He has poisoned your mind, Morg said. Her brother looked pained, torn. Sister, please, come home. The war chief will forgive you if you renounce this human if you come back to the clan. I am not going back. Grukka moved to stand beside Thane, presenting a united front. This is my home, Thane is my mate, that is not changing. Then you have made your choice. Bracca drew his own blade. The war chief sent us to bring you home or to ensure you could not shame the clan further. I had hoped you would see reason. 3 against 2, Thane observed. He had his bow, but at this range swords would be faster. They were outnumbered and outmatched. Not great odds. I have faced worse, Grukka said. She raised her axe. So have you. But before the orc warriors could attack, a voice called out from the forest. Make it 3 against 4. A woman emerged from the trees, human, with short dark hair and a longbow in her hands. She was followed by a man, also human, carrying a sword and shield. Both were strangers to Grukka. "Who are you?" Thrash demanded. "Friends," the woman said. "We heard there was a human and an orc trying to make a life together up here. We wanted to see it for ourselves." She smiled at Grukka and Thane. "Turns out, we are not the only ones tired of the old hatreds. There are others like us, scattered across the territories. Mixed couples, outcasts, people who have decided love is more important than war. We do not have much," the man added. "But we have each other and we have this. If you are willing to fight for what you believe in, you are not alone." The orc warriors looked uncertain now, the odds no longer in their favor. Grukka sheathed his sword slowly. "This is not over," he said to Grukka. "The war chief will not forget this insult. Let him come himself next time instead of sending others to do his work," Grukka replied. "I am done being afraid of him." The orcs left, their threats hollow in the face of united opposition. When they were gone, Grukka turned to the strangers, who introduced themselves as Sylvia Jameson and her husband Marcus. They were part of a loose network of mixed couples and their allies, humans and orcs and other races who believed the old wars could end if people were brave enough to build bridges instead of walls. "We have a community," Sylvia explained as they shared a meal that night. "Small, scattered, but growing. We help each other survive, trade with each other, defend each other when needed. We heard about you too from a trapper passing through. Thought you might want to know you are not as alone as you think." "We are not alone," Thane said, looking at Grukka. "But it is good to know there are others." "It is more than good," Grukka said. "It is hope." Over the following months, that hope grew. More mixed couples visited, shared their stories, offered their support. A few even settled nearby, creating a small network of homesteads where humans and orcs and others lived side by side, not in conflict but in cooperation. It was not easy. Old prejudices died hard, and there were still those who sought to drive them away or worse. But together they were stronger than they were apart. Grukka's flock grew, as did her garden. With Thane beside her and friends around her, she built not just a home but a community. It was small, fragile, but it was real. It was possible. One evening in late summer, as they sat together watching the sun set over the mountains, Thane took her hand. "Marry me," he said. It was not a question, not quite, but not a command either. Just a simple statement of desire. Grukka looked at him, this human who had chosen her over the approval of his people, who had stood beside her against threats both animal and sentient. "Humans and orcs cannot marry," she said. "There is no law that allows it, no priest who would perform the ceremony." "Then we will make our own ceremony." Sylvia and Marcus did. They spoke their vows to each other under the stars, with their friends as witnesses. It was enough for them. It can be enough for us. He squeezed her hand. "I do not need a priest or a piece of paper to tell me you are my wife. I already know it, but I want to say the words to make the promise official, to tell the world that you are mine and I am yours." Tears stung Grukka's eyes. She had thought she had given up the possibility of this, of marriage and family and belonging. But here it was, offered freely without conditions or shame. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." They held the ceremony a week later on a warm evening when the stars were bright and the air smelled of wildflowers. Their friends gathered, a motley collection of humans and orcs and others, all of them outcasts in their own way, all of them choosing love over fear. Marcus, who had once been a village elder before falling in love with an orc healer, officiated. Thane and Grukka stood facing each other, hands clasped, and spoke vows they had written together. Thane promised to stand beside her in all things, to defend her, to cherish her, to build a life with her that honored both their peoples. Grukka promised the same, her voice strong and clear. her tusks catching the starlight as she smiled when they were done, when they had been declared married in the eyes of those who mattered. They kissed to cheers and applause. It was not a grand ceremony. There were no fancy clothes or expensive gifts, but it was theirs, true and honest, and that made it perfect. That night, lying in their bed in the cottage they had built together, Grukka felt a peace she had never known. "I love you," she said. She had said it before, but tonight it felt different, weighted with the vows they had spoken. "I love you too," Thane replied, pulling her close. "My wife, my husband," she said, and the words tasted like freedom. The seasons turned as they always did. Autumn came, painting the mountains in shades of gold and red. Winter followed, harsh but bearable with their combined resources and the help of their community. Spring brought new lambs, new growth, new possibilities. And through it all, Grukka and Thane worked side by side, building the life they had promised each other. It was not easy. There were still those who hated them for what they represented, who saw their love as a threat to the old order. But there were also those who saw them as hope, as proof that the walls between peoples could be torn down, that a different future was possible. 2 years after their marriage, Grukka discovered she was pregnant. It was unexpected, rare for human and orc to conceive together, but not unheard of. The pregnancy was difficult, her body struggling with the demands of carrying a half-human child, but Thane was there every step of the way, holding her hand, soothing her fears, believing in her strength when she doubted it herself. Their daughter was born in early spring, small and squalling, with pale green skin and tiny nubs that would one day be tusks. She had Thane's eyes and Grukka's fierce spirit, and when they laid her between them, both of them crying with joy and exhaustion, Grukka felt as if her heart would burst. "She is perfect," Thane whispered, his finger stroking their daughter's impossibly soft cheek. "Absolutely perfect." "What should we name her?" Grukka asked. They had discussed names, but none had felt right until now. Thane thought for a moment, then smiled. "Hope. We should call her Hope." And so they did. Hope Irwin, daughter of a human and an orc, born into a world that did not quite know what to make of her. But she was loved fiercely and completely, and that was enough. The years that followed were full, rich with the kind of everyday joys and struggles that made up a life. Hope grew, toddling around the homestead on chubby legs, learning to speak in both the human tongue and the orc language her mother taught her. More mixed couples joined their community, drawn by stories of the place where humans and orcs lived in peace. They built homes, planted fields, raised families. It was still small, still fragile, but it was growing. On a warm summer evening, when Hope was 5 years old and running through the meadow chasing butterflies, Grukka stood with Thane on the porch they had built together. She looked out at the community they had helped create, at the homes dotting the mountainside, at the children playing without fear or hatred. "You ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Giving up your old life for this?" Thane put his arm around her, pulling her close. "Not for a single moment. This right here is everything I ever wanted. I just did not know it until I found you." He kissed her temple. "You are my home, Grukka, you and Hope. Everything else is just scenery." She leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence, the steady beat of his heart. He had walked out of the forest nearly 7 years ago, a stranger with a bow and a scarred past, and he had changed her entire world. He had shown her that love could be stronger than hate, that courage could build bridges across even the deepest divides. "I love you," she said. Not for the first time, not for the last, but always with the same depth of feeling. "I love you too," he replied. "Always." Hope came running up to them, her small face flushed with exertion and happiness. "Mama, Papa, look what I found." She held out a handful of wildflowers, mangled but offered with such earnest joy that both parents had to smile. "They are beautiful," Grukka said, taking the flowers and tucking one behind Hope's ear. "Just like you," Thane added, scooping his daughter up and making her shriek with laughter. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the three of them stood together on their porch, a family built from courage and love and impossible choices. They were human and orc, male and female, parents and partners. They were proof that the old hatreds did not have to define the future, that people could choose differently, could be better. In the distance, wolves howled, but they were no threat now. Just part of the wilderness, the wild places that surrounded their small haven of civilization. Grukka thought of the morning 7 years ago when she had found boot prints in the frost, circling her flock, and marveled at how much had changed. She had been alone then, an exile with only her sheep for company, waiting for the world to crush her for daring to be different. But a human stranger had walked out of the forest, had chosen to defend her rather than destroy her, and from that choice had grown everything she now held dear. "What are you thinking about?" Thane asked, reading the expression on her face. "Boot prints in the frost," she said. "And how sometimes the most important moments in your life start with the smallest mysteries." He smiled, understanding. "I was terrified that first night. I kept thinking you would come out and shoot me for trespassing. I nearly did, several times. I am glad you did not. So am I." They stood together as the stars began to emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Around them, the community they had helped build settled in for the night, lights appearing in windows, the sounds of laughter and conversation drifting on the evening air. It was not perfect. There were still struggles, still hardships, still those who wished them ill. But it was theirs, built with their own hands and defended with their own courage. Hope fell asleep in her father's arms, exhausted from her day of play. Thane carried her inside, tucking her into her small bed with the gentleness that still made Grukka's heart flutter. They stood together in the doorway of their daughter's room, watching her sleep, two former soldiers who had found peace in the most unexpected place. "Tomorrow we should start on that new barn," Thane said quietly. "Marcus offered to help and Sylvia said she would watch Hope." "Tomorrow," Grukka agreed. "Tonight I just want to be here, with you." They went to their own bed, the one they had built when they first decided to make a life together. It had been mended and reinforced over the years, like their relationship, growing stronger with each repair. They lay together in the darkness, her head on his chest, his arms around her, and listened to the night sounds filtering through the window. "You think Hope will face the same prejudices we did?" Grukka asked. It was a fear that haunted her sometimes, the thought of her daughter suffering for the circumstances of her birth. "Probably," Thane said honestly, "but she will also have something we did not have when we started. She will have a community that accepts her, parents who love her, and proof all around her that mixed families can thrive. She will be stronger for it, not weaker. You always know what to say, not always, but I try." Grukka lifted her head, finding his mouth in the darkness, kissing him with all the love and gratitude and passion she felt. He responded immediately, his hands sliding over her skin, knowing every curve and hollow after years of exploration. They made love slowly, tenderly, reaffirming the bond that had started with boot prints in frost and grown into something unbreakable. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, sated and drowsy, Thane spoke into the darkness. "When I fought in the war, I never thought I would find peace. I thought I was broken, that I would spend the rest of my life alone, haunted by the things I had done. But then I saw you, standing there in the moonlight with your bow, fierce and beautiful and unafraid, and something in me recognized something in you. We were both outcasts, both trying to build something good from the wreckage of our old lives. I did not know then that I was looking at my future. I am grateful every day that I was. Grukka felt tears slide down her cheeks, pooling against his chest. I was so alone before you came. I told myself I was strong enough to survive it, that I did not need anyone. But I was lying to myself. I did need someone. I needed you. You gave me everything I thought I had lost forever: home, family, belonging. You gave me hope. We gave each other hope, Thane corrected gently. That is what makes this work. It is not one person saving the other. It is both of us choosing to save ourselves together. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, safe in the home they had built and the love they had forged. Outside, the wolves that had once threatened Grukka's flock were long gone, driven away or grown old, replaced by new generations that learned to avoid the homestead where two species had learned to live as one. The mountains stood eternal, witness to their small rebellion against the hatred that had divided their peoples for so long. And in the morning, when Grukka rose to tend her flock, she would not find boot prints in the frost. She would find Thane beside her, ready to face another day of work and love and life. Because that was what they had built together, a life. Not perfect, not easy, but theirs. Earned through courage and sustained through love. It was more than either had dared hope for when they started. It was everything. The dawn broke over the mountains, painting the snow-capped peaks in shades of rose and gold. Grukka stepped outside with Thane at her side, their daughter still sleeping safely inside. The sheep were already awake, bleating their morning greetings. The garden they had planted together was flourishing, vegetables growing fat in the summer sun. Around them, their community was stirring, humans and orcs emerging from their homes to start another day. It was a new world they were building, one small choice at a time. A world where boot prints in the frost were left by friends, not threats. Where love could cross boundaries that had once seemed absolute. Where outcasts could become family. Grukka reached for Thane's hand, lacing her thick green fingers through his calloused human ones. He squeezed back, and in that simple gesture was everything they had promised each other: partnership, protection, permanence. They had faced down wolves and warriors, prejudice and isolation, and they had won. Not through violence, but through the stubborn insistence that their love was worth fighting for. "Ready for another day?" Thane asked, smiling at her. "With you," Grukka smiled back, her small tusks catching the morning light. "Always." And hand in hand, they walked into the dawn of another day, two souls who had found each other across an impossible divide and refused to let anything tear them apart. The wolves were gone. The threats had been faced and overcome. What remained was simpler, more profound. Love, family, and the life they had chosen together. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything.